Good evening, everybody. It's Carpo here. I wanted to share an old Socratic story with you. And in a nutshell, it has to do with a metaphor for the way that the illusion of reality is impressed upon our minds. The story goes a little something like this. There's a group full of people at the bottom of a cave, and they're all chained up, and all of their heads are chained, and they can't move their heads, and they can't look behind them. And all they can see is the cave wall, and they can't see the fire, which is the source of light, but that fire is casting a shadows off of them and off of other things onto the cave wall. In their reality, that's all there is. One day, one of the men manages to get free, and he turns his head. And at first, he's blinded by the light of the fire. His eyes haven't adjusted yet. And once his eyes slowly adjust, he starts to realize that what he thought was a reality was just an illusion. It was just a shadow cast by the actual light. Then he slowly ascends from the cave and hits sunlight, which is even brighter still. And you see where the story's going. I don't have to cover the whole thing. The story's a metaphor for the way that we are so convinced that what we know is real. Until we break free of various chains, we will always be there. Always be confined to that ignorance. I'm no exception. You're no exception. Every one of us has gone through some point in our lives where we realized that what we previously thought was true may not be so true. Now, if you haven't had that revelation yet, maybe it's time. But for the rest of us, everyone's had a point in their life where they realize that they've been fooled. Now, the illusion takes many forms, and this is why it's so important to understand it. And this is why it's so important for me to understand it, is because there's not only the illusion of this plastic society, and I'm not just talking about the illusion that Hollywood pulls over your eyes, or the illusion that you get from this idea that society is perfect, or that American is strong. I'm not talking about the nonsense. I'm talking about real, honest to God, like truth and lies. Being lied to not only by yourself, but by people in general who don't even realize that they're doing it. We've been pushing our opinions on each other for so long that much of what we think is true is based on others' research. And this is why we get into philosophy, to understand what others have thought and which patterns they've thought through, so we can understand different thinking patterns. And I'm never-ending fascination with various philosophers and the ideas that they've had. Socrates and Plato, who wrote pretty much the dialogues of Socrates, but he didn't, Socrates himself never wrote a word. And the funny thing is, Socrates believed that written word, tainted the truth. Now, and I want to reflect on this for a minute, because I think it's a really important factor. Socrates thought that language, written language, was a flawed way to transfer information, which in our day and age, we couldn't have it any other way. We look at the histories and say, well, word of mouth that's been passed down is inadequate. But he believed in looking a person in the eye and explaining exactly what this thing meant according to that person. If you were talking to a 10-year-old child, you would explain it in a certain way. If you had to tell it to a 60-year-old man, you would tell it in a different way. When it's a written word, everyone reads it the same way. And that's something to consider. I should say each person reads it a different way, but the words are the same. Each person perceives it differently. So when word is written down, it becomes tainted by man's very interpretation of what that word means, or what that sentence could mean. And we could, I won't extend that into the realm of religious text, because this is where word and written word come into conflict. But you can see how the idea that if Plato wrote all these dialogues, he saw Socrates as a very important figure, but not to go as far as to connect the two, because they had their own opinions. And each one of these people had their own ideas of how a proper government should run, and how a world should run. And there were flaws, and there were benefits to each. Um, the Republic, Plato wrote the Republic, and the Republic, I haven't read it, but apparently his idea of the city within this fictional city, this perfect city, it was more of a dictatorship. People didn't have the freedoms to do what they wanted. Yet, at the same time, they expected to have these thinking or philosopher king type people. And where it comes into conflict is without a democracy, you can't have philosophy. You can't have free thinking. And this is why democracy is such a failure, yet it's the best we have. So, we've pulled so many foolish notions out of thin air to keep ourselves afloat, whether it be as a nation or be as the world. But from what I've seen in my little world, people are angry. And through that anger comes a sort of discomfort for those around them. When folks get themselves riled up, they lose their ability to focus and think clearly. And I don't want to get into politics here, because but as far as the democracy goes, what I wanted to say is that a democracy is run on rhetoric. Okay, rhetoric is basically people, officials, government officials, politicians, they're all trained in rhetoric. It's a way of convincing people that you are right. And it has absolutely nothing to do with truth, or the real truth, or the facts of the matter. Rhetoric is nothing more than convincing people that your point of view is right, and pointing the finger at someone else and telling them that they're wrong. This is the problem with our political system. And as long as people are funded based on their rhetoric, it will continue. And this little rant I'm on here is extending and reaching to various aspects of life. And obviously I started out with one factor, and then I start moving on to something else. It's because all these things tie in together to me. They're all important. They're all inclusive in our future, in order to better our future. And there are times when I think, why do I even care? It's not my problem. I just got to live my life and let others live theirs. And then I realize, my kids have to grow up in this world. If and if they have to grow up with as many idiots as I saw when I was growing up, we're going to continue to have problems. People just don't think. I don't like to sound elitist or superior, but this is in the Platonic dialogues, and basically the question was always proposed: can there be an absolute truth? And if so, is everything else false? And how do you prove something is true? There were some funny little things within the way that they used to think about these things, but when a person would have an argument, the idea was to have something come of it, not something being proven to prove your point. And some of these guys, like Paracelsus, I believe, the Paracelsian philosophy. Um, no, wait, it wasn't Paracelsus. I'm sorry. It was, what was his name? Heraclitus, I think. Yeah. No. Yeah, anyway. I get these guys mixed up. And this is funny because all these philosophers have these like little one-namers, these little Madonna-like names. And, you look back on it and you think, God, now we just make fun of people that have those one names. But, God, they really endured some of these names. But anyway, he was one of the Greek emperors, and he believed in rhetoric. He was trained in rhetoric, and there was another fella who charged a lot of money in the Roman kingdom to go around and teach people rhetoric, how to convince people that they were right. And there were entire cultures based on this, and our Western culture is no exception. The world that we live in right now, our Western world, is based on rhetoric. It's based on lies. It's based on fooling the American people, let's say, even in America. I don't like to use the U.S. for example, but that's all I have, because that's where I live. And, the American people have been lied to from the beginning. Pretty much every war we've gone into, every event that's happened has been covered up in one shape or, some shape or form in one way or another. And it's led people to be very, very suspicious and wary of their government, and very suspicious of each other. And people have gone a little bit overboard on it, even to the point of assuming that, I won't get into assumptions, because I don't want to burst anyone's bubble as far as my opinion on this whole worldwide global conspiracy, because to an extent it's true. To an extent we are being watched. To an extent we are losing our freedoms. And to an extent there is a one world type government forming. But it's not to the extent where every corner we turn, everyone's in on it. These movies that they show you, this desensitizing movies where they show how in control the government is. And you'll see these cop shows and dramas where they'll show all these people, the FBI interacting with the FBI and CIA and cops can't even get along with one another. I mean, how do you expect a global conspiracy when you can't even get local law enforcement organized? But by portraying an image that they are in control, we give them control. And this is one of the biggest issues that I see, is that the more suspicious we become and the more we think that we have no control, the more we lose the control that we still have. So in my country, I think people can make a difference, but people have to wake up to see what's going on and to understand that it's not about getting one over on your neighbor or having the greener lawn. It's about neighborhood gardens and teaming up and fighting against tyranny where you see it. And where I see it is basically every governmental agency. It's seeping out of the cracks. It's everywhere. But if I could extend it to the military, that's where most of it goes, unfortunately. So as long as we're fighting to have things that we don't deserve, that's what will continue to happen. So I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe I'll continue this, but hope everyone's doing well, and have a great evening.